Hi, my name is Don Sexauer. I'm lead culinary instructor for Nash Community College, and today we're going to talk about making what's called a cardinale sauce. Cardinale sauce is typically made with some kind of a shellfish base. It can be shrimp, it can be lobster, it can be crayfish, or it can be crabs. So you want to use a shellfish. And riding kind of piggyback to Chef Carlo's video that he just did on making lobster bisque and cooking lobsters, I asked him to save me some of the bodies that were left over so I could make a sauce out of this. Now you'd say to yourself, why would I want to make a cardinale sauce if I've got this beautiful shrimp bisque that we made and I've got the lobster that we have left over? Let's say you have raviolis or you have a pasta. This sauce is a heavier, more creamy sauce than the bisque, and instead of being a soup, it is actually a sauce you would serve with something. And it's not a difficult sauce. In fact, it's the basic things that you need are your lobster bodies, sorry, kind of nasty, mushrooms, or what I do is I use the stems of mushrooms, so I don't even waste my mushrooms, and then I've got celery and carrot and red onion. Recipes mostly call for shallot, but red onion will substitute for a shallot or a good sweet onion that you have. And then you'll need a sherry of some kind, water, and heavy cream. And I'd use the heavy cream, just a basic heavy cream. Doesn't have to be anything special, because what you're going to do is you're going to cook everything in a pot with the water, basically create this really, really intense flavored broth from the lobster bodies. Then you're going to add your sherry and let that cook down, finish it with a little tomato paste, let that cook down. We're gonna puree the whole thing, just chop it up in a Roboku or a food processor, and then cook that even more. And then strain that out and finish it with the heavy cream, and you get this really intense, rich, lobster flavored broth that is cooked with the heavy cream that makes this amazing sauce. It's really, as they say, to die for. So I don't need to do anything to the bodies because they're already kind of chopped up, as you can see. So they're just going to go directly into my pot. Done. For the carrot, it doesn't have to be any kind of perfect chop because, like I said, we're going to chop everything up. I just want to cut it down to get as much extraction of flavor as I can in the short time I'm going to cook the lobsters, which is probably going to be about maybe 30 minutes at the most. And so with my vegetables, I don't want them to be too large because then they won't sweat out enough of their flavor. But I do want them to have some characteristic of flavor giving into it, but not too intense. So my onions, my carrots, my celery are all going to be about a half inch, 3/4 inch cut. Doesn't really matter. And you're doing a basic Mirepoix. So that's 2 parts onion, 1 part carrots, 1 part celery. And then my mushroom stems, I'm going to add to it. I have about, about 2-3 ounces of mushroom stems. I'm going to add to that. And then my water. And I got about 2 cups, about a quart of water here, and it's just enough to cover the top of the bodies, to get up to the top of the bodies, not really cover, because I'm gonna take a potato masher and mash everything down once it starts cooking. And then once it starts cooking and it cooks down a bit, I'll add my sherry to it to let that cook down, and my tomato paste to start to enhance some flavors, and then we'll let that reduce down, puree it, and we'll start adding our cream to it, and add the cream and cream it up. Should be good. Okay, so basically, as you can see, what we have here is the same thing Chef Carlo made with a lobster stock for his bisque, but I've got mushrooms in there, a little bit more intense flavors with the specialized onions and the carrots and the celery. I will season this with salt and pepper when I get to the end because I don't want my pepper or my salt to concentrate too much, so I'm not putting the peppercorns and the bay leaves and all that into the mix to start with. I will put salt and pepper in with it later at the end. And then right now I'm going to take and kind of mash up the bodies a little bit so that they get down into the mix. And I'm going to let this cook for about a half hour, and then we'll put it into the Roboku or the food processor, and we'll chop it up real nice and fine. And then I'll come back and I will let that cook down some more, and I'll put the rest of the stuff into it. All right, so this step is not absolutely necessary. This is one of the steps that we use in the culinary field because we have the ability to have these kind of machines. If you don't have a food processor, it's not absolutely necessary for you to do this. You could take your mix, which is a lovely nasty boil right now, and just let it cook down and get that broth really, really flavorful like Carlo did when he was making the lobster bisque. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put them all into my food processor and chop it up so I get even more of an extraction out of it, which is what I'm looking for. I want to get as much of the flavor out of these guys as I possibly can. and it's messy and it's nasty and it makes a lot of noise, and I love to destroy things, so it's also kind of fun. All right, now I'm not gonna leave this open because it will spray everywhere. So I'm gonna cover it and you'll hear it, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Let me get a scraper real quick. You can see inside there how destroyed they are. Yes. So now I wanna get as much of the spray off of there as I can, because that's all the flavor from the the lobster. Then I'm going to take this guy, remove his blade, yum. Oh, it smells great. So I'm gonna go put this back on the stove and add my sherry, bring it back up to a boil. Now let's say you don't have a pot this big. If you have a saute pan or a smaller pot or a smaller pan, you can always use that. With this pot, what I'm getting more with the broth is more of a concentration of flavor, because my sides are straight up and a lot of my essence and flavor is dropping back down into the pot. With the slope-sided pans, I'm gonna reduce and get rid of the liquid quickly, but I'm not gonna get as much of that concentration of flavor because my steam's allowing some of the stuff to go off because of my sloped sides. All right, coming back up to a boil, nice. This is about a cup of sherry. I like my stuff nice and rich and drunky and stuff. All right, this is gonna come up to a boil, and then I'm gonna let it reduce down. I'll let it cook down to about half of where it is now. I'll take about another 20 minutes, and then I'm gonna add the heavy cream and let that cook down by another half, and then we'll strain it out and we'll do it in the large pan to get it to that nice finish. All right, so as you can see, I'm down to like no liquid in here. It's what we call au sec, or dry. So now I'm gonna add my heavy cream and let that come up to a boil. I'm gonna get as much out as I can. This is about 2 cups of heavy cream. Stir it in, let it cook, let this steep for a second, and get some of that flavor from the lobster, as much actually infused into it as I can. And I'll reduce that down to get to the flavor that I want. So let this come back up to a boil for a couple of seconds, and then I'll strain it out. And we're getting close to what's called a nappe, and a nappe is when I can coat the back of the spoon or the spatula and it doesn't open up holes, it stays as a solid, which I don't want to do this yet because I want to strain my sauce. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn that off so I don't burn myself. I'm going to take my sauce and pour it into, this is what's called a chinois. So I'm going to get it into that chinois, then I'm going to take and start pushing my sauce through. And a chinois is like a colander or a strainer, and it will leave all of the particles and all of the solids that are from the sauce inside the chinois, while it allows my nice cream sauce to cook out and go through the base. All right, now for time purposes, I'm just going to let this drain out. I'll strain out the rest of this later, and I'll get even more, probably about another 1/4 cup out of it. That's lovely. Look at that color. Nice light orange. One of my favorite things to do with this sauce is I make I don't eat lobster, so I take the lobster itself and I will make something out of that and then put it into, say, a ravioli or put it into a sauce. I won't sit down and just eat a lobster, but I will eat it cooked in something. And this sauce will allow that lobster meat to become even more rich and succulent than it already is. Coming out nice. I'm almost in a nappe, which is lovely. And as the heavy cream cooks, what happens is a lot of the moisture comes out, so that fat content comes together. And to make a really good sauce, or especially an integral sauce, you want a fat, a protein, and an acid. Right now I've got the fat, which is the heavy cream, the protein is the lobster, and the acid is the tomato base. Coat the back of a spoon, that's a nappe. That means that my fat, my acid, and my proteins are all at nice unity. Oh man, that's really good. That's good. All right, now I'm gonna season it because I didn't season it before. If you season before, like if I put salt in this and I cooked it, and let's say it cooks down, I can't make it less salty, because if the salt will concentrate as it cooks down. Salt doesn't evaporate, it just concentrates. So it would become very, very salty if I had salted this to start with. So you always want to season your sauces, your soups, whatever, at the end with salt. Pepper you can put into it, that's fine. Like I put a few peppercorns into the mix, so it got a little peppery flavor, but I think it needs just a little bit more. So I'm gonna add just a little bit more pepper. And so this is taking the lobster bodies, the shells, the stuff that you were gonna throw out, and making an amazing, amazing sauce. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm gonna.